special Labor Day edition of Frankie Flowers Garden Q&A, where I come here to help you grow the best gardens, to make that Garden of Whedon turn into the Garden of Eden, to bring you to the glory of a beautiful harvest tomato. And what should you do now that we are heading our way, and we are in our way to the month of September and heading our way towards fall? Welcome. For those that don't know me, hey, who is this guy? This guy is Frank Ferragini, aka Frankie Flowers of City TV's Breakfast Television and also City TV's City Line, where I'm a garden expert, 4-time best-selling garden author. My family owns and operates 2 garden centers, one in Bradford, one in Barrie, called Bradford Greenhouses Garden Gallery. I'm a product of several thousand hours of gardening labor, glory, journeys, failures, successes, and a whole bunch in between. And really what I'm here to do is to help you kind of go through that in terms of your own home garden as well. For all those that are here on a nice Monday morning, if you're wondering why I didn't join you through Sunday, I was just trying to take the last little bit of summer in with my boys, of course, that are heading their way off to school tomorrow. So once again, good morning. Just want to make sure that everybody's out there and seeing how things are going here. We got the captions that are working. Everything's working out there as well. Just a really quick shout out to Marlene, which is saying good morning, Frankie. Good morning to you as well. We're also saying another good morning there to Sandy. Got to put my glasses on there because it's kind of like that one of those days where I need to see a little bit better as well. Here we go. This is from Trish right away. Trish is asking the question, how do I eliminate the vine weed in my garden that comes back each and every year? That vine weed is indeed an annual weed. So if it's the one that I'm thinking, it's fairly invasive that it does go through, and it's very hard to kind of control because when you go to pull it, it seems that you never get the total vine itself. Best time to weed something like that is after a rainfall or after the garden is wet. That's when it'll lift through. Doing a late fall mulching of the garden as well will smother any seeds that are sitting there on top of the surface so that next spring, that annual weed can't germinate by seed. That weed itself will almost go into a white flower. You always need to remove that weed before it goes into white flower and or seed. That will reduce the amount of weeds that you have, and eventually over time will eliminate them as well. So I hope that question has helped you as well. We have a good morning from Toronto this morning from Jean Lee or Jen Lee. We also have another good morning this morning from Marlene. Good morning to you. We have another good morning this morning from Ashley Brown. Glad you enjoyed your weekend. Question, is it time to put the poinsettia in the dark? Thank you. As a matter of fact, we are growing poinsettias right now at my family greenhouse. And indeed, what we are doing is starting to restrict the amount of daylight hours. So what you need to do, because that poinsettia is a daylight sensitive plant, is we need to ensure that it's getting 12 hours of light and really 12 hours of darkness. The best thing to do with a poinsettia at this time of the year is to put it in a bedroom that's like a spare bedroom that the light never goes on but still has a window. That way it's getting its natural amount of light, but also is getting them natural amount of darkness. If you don't have a room like that, then you have to restrict the amount of light. The more light you restrict to it, the shorter the daylight hours, the quicker it will actually reduce the amount of chlorophyll in that leaf, which is the green part of the leaf that will leave the leaf and then show you the true forms of color of that poinsettia plant that's there. We have good morning from London this morning. That's a shout out to Kathy. Miriam, good morning. My good friend Miriam, good morning to you. I'm great, by the way. We also have another good morning out there from Woodbridge from Diana. So a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about. First off, this is the time of year where everybody's making the sauce, the tomato sauce. Hey, with all those tomatoes that you have, and maybe you're purchasing tomatoes, and maybe you grew a beautiful plant of basil, and then all of a sudden something's going wrong with your basil. So let me just share your screen that's here as well. And we're going to go over to a Chrome tab, and I'm just going to go over to, boom, and I'm going to share this to you. So this is what's happening to a lot of basil plants at this time of the year, and it happens quite often at this time of the year. And it's really due to somewhat of the different temperatures and just what's going on with that plant during the growing season. And this is downy mildew in basil or basil. You'll also sometimes even see a late blight in basil and or basil where the plant starts to defoliate, lose its leaves. It starts to get that blacking. You can see those are the spores underneath that you have there. And really, it's just going to start to disintegrate the plant overall. Some of the leaves that are still there will be still good to use and edible. But the best thing that you can do for this plant is to remove it, discard it. And for next season, do not plant basil in the same area. If it's planted in a pot, we want to remove the soil. And we also want to ensure that we're using a new soil for next year. And we want it to pot that it was in to wipe it with a little bit of bleach so that we don't have that for next year as well. That's quite common that happens as well at this time of year. The other thing that will happen at this time of the year, and I'm going to share this as well, is we may see this in tomato plants as well, is your tomato plants may be looking so good, so fine, but then all of a sudden you start to see this that happens. And what happens is you start to see some of the markings on the top of the tomato that almost looks like a bruise. You start to see the leaves themselves, especially from the bottom, start to blacken and start to die off. And that's late blighted tomatoes. If you're seeing this on one tomato, I really encourage you to remove that tomato plant, to get rid of it and discard it. Don't plant tomatoes in the same space next year. Kind of clean up any of the leaves that are around. Wash your hands after so that you're not touching other tomato plants to spread, because this can easily spread to other tomato plants and is quite common for happening this year. So I hope that's not happening to you in your gardens, and I hope you have the best tomato sauce possible. Okay, so let's go here. We have a question that we have. I have a very long raspberry canes that lean over near to ground level, lots of them. How do I keep them raised so that critters don't eat the fruit before I harvest them? This happens quite often because the canes of those raspberries can get quite long. And often what you'll see is along the side of a raspberry row is you'll see a wire, and that wire goes end to end, and a string that goes end to end. And really what that wire is to do is to support the canes. So halfway up through the canes, you run a string line or a line of wire. They'll go right through, and that'll support the canes themselves, and that won't allow. So really what that comes down to is just really some staking that you need to be doing. Here we go, a question from Rose this morning. Good morning, Frankie. My rose bushes has been eaten by Japanese beetle. Should I cut them down? If they have been eaten, I would indeed cut them back. I would cut them back by about a third. And then when they come back to even later in the fall, as soon as we start to get a few frosts, we're going to cut them a little bit further to overwinter them. We're really cutting them to about 12 inches above the ground, 12 to 16 inches above the ground. And it depends on the variety of rose itself. It is a Floribunda, Grandiflora, or a hybrid tea. Those roses are grafted. And because they are grafted, we need to protect the graft. So we cut them back and then we mound soil up around them. If it is, let's say, Rosa rugosa, which is basically a shrub rose. If it's David Austin roses, Canadian Explorer Series roses, those roses are not grafted. We don't need to do the overwintering. So just cutting them back by a third at this time of the year would be fine. And cutting it back after getting that damage will actually help it out as well. We have a question this morning from Virginia. Good morning, Frankie. I have two questions. It's $5 per question, so that's $10. No, just joking. Should cedars be trimmed in the fall or spring? Best time to trim cedars is during the growing season. So you wait for that first flush of growth, and you're doing those in June, July, and even into the beginning of August. You could probably get away still to prune them now or trim them at this time of the year, because we're still about a month away from significant frost. But we don't want to prune them or trim them or shape them anytime close to frost, because that could cause some damage. Number two, what time is the best to irrigate a lawn? Thank you. Best time to water a lawn is in the morning. The reason being is that will dry the lawn during the day. And then at night, the lawn will go to bed at night dry, and also your gardens will go to bed dry at night. That'll allow the reduction of disease that happens, and then an early morning watering. So at about sunrise or about a half an hour before sunrise is always the best time to water your lawn and or garden. Your lawn needs about 1 inch per week. It needs a little bit of additional water when it's just newly sodded lawn, but those are the best times to water. If you do have an irrigation system, you can do the timers, and those timers can be set by dawn and or dusk. And there's lots of different control panels that are out there. The Ratio as well will actually measure weather stations in the area, this control panel. And that will actually ensure that you're not wasting water. So that days that we have rain or significant rain, it'll measure the amount of rainfall that we're getting in the area. It'll take into consideration your soil type, your slope, and moderate and adjust your watering so you're using the most efficient amount of water. Polly, good morning to you as well. Good morning. We have a little comment on a reply. Had the same issue years ago. We put down pea gravel, eventually no more weeds, and it helped with water drainage. So this is probably an answer to the vine that they were talking about, that we had that vine-like weed. Pea gravel is one, it's a good mulch. The only thing about pea gravel is it won't break down. So that's sometimes a benefit, but it doesn't add to your soil quality. So the nice thing about other shredded mulches is as they break down, they're number one, reducing weeding, maintaining moisture, and as they break down, they're actually improving soil quality as well. Greg, good morning from New Brunswick. Good morning to the East Coast. Beautiful place. Do I have to spray my for bugs my poinsettia before bringing indoors? Thank you, Irina. Yes, I would always try to, any plant that we're bringing from the outside inside, it's always just a good idea to give it a little bit of a light spraying with an insecticidal soap, like a Bug Be Gone. That's going to make sure that we're not bringing any insects indoors. When we're spraying a plant, we're either doing it in the morning before the sun gets to a high intensity, so we're doing it before 10 a.m. in the morning, or we're doing it in the evening after about 5, 6 o'clock at this time of year when the sun starts to set. Never during the heat or the intensity of a day do we want to spray. When we're spraying, we want to spray the top side and underside of the leaves all together at the same time. Here we go. Another question for Kim. I have a few types of coleus. All but one produce seeds. So there are some new varieties of coleus where they're not, they're kind of breeding them so they don't produce the flower and or seed production. The ones with dark purple center trims with green has not produced seeds. Why? And that's probably just the genetics, because a lot of people don't like the flower heads on the coleus. So they've been trying to breed some coleus varieties that don't produce seeds, that are basically non-sexual plants that will not produce the flower pod and or seed pod. So that's the reason being. And really, this is a question we asked a long time ago with my good friend Tanya, was do you like the flower heads on coleus or do you not? And that's something that right now breeders are trying to consider, because it's amazing what we can do when we're breeding plants. And sometimes people are saying, well, that makes a genetically modified plant. Several plants in nature are modified, and what modifies plants in nature are bees. Bees pollinating other plants, cross-pollination, which then modifies the genetics of that plant. Just like us, when we choose our mate, all of a sudden our family now is not the same gene pool, because those kids that I had are different than the kids my parents had. So it's kind of, you can see how things can go down. There are some foods out there that are fairly genetically modified to the extreme, things like corn or something that do have some modifications that are a little bit more on the extreme side. Here we go. Suzanne, I plan on bringing my very first hydrangea, on buying my very first hydrangea. What ones do you suggest for the Parry Sound area? I was just in Parry Sound not too long ago. I was at a lake called Boyd Lake. The varieties that I would recommend for up in Parry Sound would be Limelight hydrangeas, Incredible hydrangeas, Little Limelight hydrangeas, Fire and Ice. But I would really recommend the Limelights. Good, strong varieties. Stay away from any macrophilia. Stay away from any endless summers. Just not hardy enough for up there, and they just won't really perform like you want them to. As well with the hydrangeas, the PGs are another great variety, but those Limelights, PGs, Incredibles, Fire and Ice do need some pretty good sun. They like water and they like sun. So just make sure that you're not putting them in complete shade. Francis, good morning. Frank from Newfoundland. Good morning to you on the rock as well. How are things on the rock today, guys? Frankie, this is from Christine. What do you suggest when tomatoes are grown at this time of year? The plants are leaning over because of the ripe tomatoes or ready to ripen. That's staking, yeah, because we're getting the weight of those tomato plants. And those tomatoes will be leaning over because we have the weight of that fruit. So I even had one of my plants that I had to tie back a little bit further. So putting some additional stakes. We really want tomatoes to ripen on the vine. If they're partially ripened, we can remove some of those tomatoes and we can put them indoors, out of light. You don't actually put them in light to ripen. You put them in a room temperature room, out of light. And even if you put one ripe tomato with a bunch of other ones that are partially ripened, that'll quicken the ripening process. Even if you have ripe bananas beside ripe tomatoes, they'll both quicken the ripening process because they're reducing ethylene that actually helps that ripening process that's out there. Here we go from Paula Polly. I planted 2 young maple trees in July. Is there any special care to prepare them for winter? Thanks. First off is making sure that you support them. So something that we're putting there to help them in case that we're going to have freezing rain or heavy wet snow that may make them lean over. So we're going to put a support, so some sort of stake to stake them over, making sure that they're well watered all the way into winter so that they're not going into winter under stress. A quick start fertilizer, which is a transplant fertilizer, will really help their root system. Let them go into dormancy, and that's about it. If they're very small, sometimes what you can do is you can put a big like bucket over the top of them and just put a rock on top of that bucket just to provide a little bit of extra insulation. But really for a maple tree, it's going to go into dormancy, snow load around. It's a good thing. The main thing is sometimes those young trees can actually get eaten by things like bunnies and even deer. So sometimes you'll see people take a piece of drainage, like the plastic drainage pipe, which is the black one, and or white's actually a better one if you can get it white, because the white will reflect the light. And just kind of putting that as a collar around the base of that plant, that tree, that'll prevent any of those rodents or animals from eating that tender young maple tree. Okay, Nina. Some of the bobos got crispy this year, and that's Bobo Hydrangea. Should I prune these crispy balls now or wait until spring? ISP, the entire plant is dead. Will it come back next year? I would prune it all the way back. I would prune it back to that's just about 6 to 8 inches above the ground. Keep watering because that's why they got crispy overall. Is it dead? It may even flush after you prune it back, flush a little bit of growth this season. But if you actually don't see any growth by the time snow flies on the bottom of that plant, it's probably dead. Depends on where you bought it. And a reminder that always keep your receipts from any nursery when you're buying plant material, because most nurseries either have a 1 or 2 year guarantee, as long as you have the receipt, and you have to bring the plant back itself. But you got to check with the nursery and or even the home improvement store where you're purchasing from, because everyone has a different guarantee policy that's out there. Okay. Here we go as well from Karen. Is fall a good time to plant emerald cedars? I'm glad you asked this question because that's what I was going to put. September is an amazing month to be landscaping and planting. The reason what makes this month so amazing is we have warm soil temperatures, we have cooler daytime temperatures, cooler nights, and a greater frequency of rain. An amazing time for plants to establish their root system, not to go under stress, and also amazing time generally to take advantage of some sales that are out there. So early fall and even into mid-fall is and late summer is the most amazing time to be planting shrubs, perennials, and doing a bunch of work on your garden. September is a busy month overall. You can amend soil, clean up plants, harvest seeds, harvest fruit, improve and dig new gardens that are out there, plant perennials, divide. The only thing that we're wanting to do is any spring blooming plants, we don't want to divide and or prune. Anything like a lilac, we don't want to prune, because a lot of those rhododendrons, azaleas don't prune and or move at this time of the year, or will lose their blooms for next season. Matthew Amos is saying, there's another one from Rhonda, but Matthew Amos just say good morning to you as well. Morning, Frank. Can I plant forget-me-nots in the fall? Are they easy to plant and take care of as they are for a memorial bench? Yes, you can plant forget-me-nots in the fall. They are fairly easy to take care of. They're actually a shade plant. The only thing is they're easy, but they will spread. So the reason why they call them forget-me-not, because you won't forget that you planted them, because they will go everywhere. They're fairly invasive. So put a nice edge around that memorial bench that you're doing. That edge will actually help for those forget-me-nots, not for spreading into other areas. But fall, excellent time. You can grab them from somebody else's garden. If anybody has forget-me-nots, they'll probably be very grateful and thankful that you're taking some off their hands. Okay. And Tara. Hi, Frankie. Would now be a good time to move strawberry vanilla hydrangea tree. It's a standardized tree. As long as we're going into a nice week of cooler temperatures, which this week looks good, and we do have a greater frequency of rain. I don't know where you're sending me the message from. It could be anywhere across the country. So as long as we have temperatures below 22 degrees during the daytime, we have overnight lows in the double digits or teens, a little bit of rainfall, perfect time. Use that quick start fertilizer. Try not to disturb the roots on that plant as well, because that'll be kind of harmful for it. So we're trying to, when we're moving anything at this time of the year, we almost dig a trench around the outer side of it. We dig down and we try to dig underneath. One of the easiest things you can do is to almost take a tarp and or a blanket, and you'll tuck it. And then when you're digging, you can almost pull it up, and you can almost pull it underneath the root ball. And then you get your 2 or 3 or 4 friends, depending upon the size of it, to lift each corner, and you almost tie the corner nice and tight, and you walk it over to the new hole, slide it into the new hole, put it in there so it's about just above soil level. We always just want it just slightly above, so we're going to hill some soil up. Then we pull that tarp and or blanket up from underneath. We don't disturb the roots, and we have a fantastic job at moving a plant. Rhonda says, you are the best. Thanks. Some days I am. Some days I don't. Some days everybody has the fuglies where you feel fat and ugly, and it's okay. You can look like the most confident person in the world, and you'll see that person, and don't worry. They're just like you. There are days where they have the fuglies. Today, I'm not having a fugly day, but today's just kind of like just a relaxed, nice, calm. ease day because I know tomorrow is back to school. I got to go back to BT, be up at the early before the crack of dawn, and get my kids all prepared as well. So it's a busy time. Delima says, I have 2 hydrangeas, nice and green, but not blooming. Please help. So if hydrangea is not blooming, it could be time of pruning. So if it is a purple and or pink hydrangea and it has a larger leaf, that's a macrophilia. Those bloom on old wood. So at this time of the year, we really don't want to prune them at all. We want to make sure we just kind of leave them because it's the old wood. Next spring, all we're going to do is remove any dead wood that's there. If it's an incredible Annabelle, PG, Limelights, Fire and Ice, Bobo, all those bloom on new wood. So those we could prune in the fall. If they're not blooming, then it could be that you're just not getting enough light. So improper pruning, is it getting enough light? Those are all the questions that you have. And if it hasn't bloomed in 3 years, you're probably going to want to move that hydrangea somewhere else or select a better variety overall. This is from Jane. Jane says, our cucumbers didn't grow very well this year. We got some off, but very few. Anything we can do for next year to help? So Jane, probably they did get a powdery mildew, which is the white on the leaf. If that was the case, try to clean that garden as best as possible. Next season, don't plant cucumbers in the same area. If we can do a crop rotation and plant them somewhere different, and maybe where the cucumbers were planted, we can plant some lettuce and or leaf lettuce. Right now, if you have some additional seeds, you can always do a late sowing of some of those plants as well. So that's kind of cool as well. So that's what I would recommend. Plant to a new location next season. There are some new varieties that are more resistant to powdery mildew. I still have cucumbers on. I had a new snack type cucumber that was really quite good overall. Morning watering. Try when you're watering, don't water the foliage. Try to water the root itself. That will reduce the amount of disease and or powdery mildew you'll get. And then also make sure the garden itself does have some good air circulation, so don't jam pack it too full overall. Matthew, got to give a shout out to my man, Matthew. Looking forward to seeing you on BT. I missed you on BT last week. I took a few days to pick up my guys from camp and to do laundry. A lot of laundry, like a lot of laundry. Okay, Peggy, good morning, Frankie. I have 2 peonies that haven't bloomed for 2 years. Okay, so if your peonies are not blooming, peonies, if they're planted too deeply, that could be one reason. You always get foliage. Peonies need light, so it needs to be either west or south-facing location that gets good amount of light. So it needs at least 6 hours of light. So if they haven't bloomed, I would move them to a new location with more light. When you plant them a little bit above ground level and hill that soil up. Even when you go to move them, divide them, so almost split them into 2. Boom, that can boost them out. And even if they are in lots of full sun, I would lift them, split them, divide them, plant them a little higher. Boom, see how that works next year and see how you do overall. Here's a question that we have about Japanese beetles. Japanese beetles destroyed all my potted flowers. What can I do? There are beetle traps that are available, but as well, there's beetle be gone. Those are 2 things. Also, you want to check your lawn to make sure that you don't have grubs. You can still apply grub be gone at this time of the year. To check your lawn for grubs, you're going to dig out a 1 by 1, so 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, 12 inches, like a square. And you're going to just rip that sod, like remove that sod off the top. You're going to dig down. If you have 4 grubs in that area, you have a grub issue. The grub be gone should be applied after a rainfall, or water the lawn first, apply the grub be gone down, and then water the lawn again. So during a rainy day, it's perfect. Where you go out in the morning, you put down the grub be gone, it rains throughout that day. That's fantastic. We have another great question here from Lisa, and thank you. I'm grateful you guys are here with me this morning. One of my honeysuckles, learn how to speak Frank, grew beautiful, but no flowers, has sun, but the plant is in front of it, low, high plants, next steps, has plants in front. So the plants in front should make no difference whatsoever. The honeysuckle itself, if it's getting too high of nitrogen, could be one of the reasons. I would cut that honeysuckle back this fall quite aggressively, at least half its size overall, prune deadwood for next season. As long as it's getting full sun, it will eventually bloom. Sometimes it does take them a little bit of time to get into their bloom period. And sometimes if you stress them a bit, cut back on the watering, and then cut back on the fertilizing, that can happen as well and help as well. Christine saying good morning from Beaton. Hey, good morning from B-Town. How? On green, roses not blooming, and they are very tall. No change from last year, and they bloomed bunches. Okay, so why didn't they bloom? one of the reasons why they didn't bloom. If the roses are very tall, we already talked about that graft point. So if it's a hybrid tea, Floribunda grandiflora, those roses are grafted onto a rootstock. It's actually a wild rose rootstock. So you'll see that you'll look down to the bottom of the stems and you'll actually see like almost like a chunky, almost bulbous kind of area of wood. And generally you'll see wax over it because that's the graft point. And then you'll see the branches over top. If underneath that graft point, you're seeing those stems coming, that means the top died from last winter and you have a wild rose. So if it's a wild rose, it'll never bloom. So I'm guessing that what you have there is a rose that reverted over to a wild rose. And because of that, that's why you have very tall plants and not a rose. So time to get rid of it. Climbing hydrangeas, man, they can be beautiful. They grow vigorously. So just a word of warning, they stick to brick as well. Any secrets on how to grow on a wall faster? Okay, water is key. It does like shade. You need a trellis structure to try to train it to grow up the wall. Within 2 to 3 seasons, it'll start to really go. In the third season's when it will really grow. So increase the watering, do some fertilizing, and then just have a structure there that will train it initially to climb, and then it'll grow. So just a word of warning, you may be wanting it to grow faster, but in time, you'll be like, slow it down. And that's when you're going to have to prune away overall. Brenda, good morning, Frankie. Thank you so much for your help. It's my pleasure to be here, guys. When is the best time to trim or prune a maple tree? Will it harm the tree if it removes some lower branches right now? If there's smaller lower branches, you will not harm the tree. The best time to prune a maple is when it's in dormancy. So really when we're in early December, even in early January, that's the best time to prune any deciduous tree, specifically a maple, because we want it to be in dormancy. You never want to do a spring pruning on a maple because it'll bleed. That's why we get maple syrup, because it's bleeding. When we tap it, we're actually making that plant bleed a little bit. So we don't want to prune. So when it's in dormancy, but smaller branches anytime, dead branches, anytime you can prune. Linda. Hi, Frankie. I have a vine-like weed that just keeps coming back and spreading. How do I get rid of it? Every year it seems to get worse. We talked about that right at the front of this. The first thing that we talked about. So go back and watch the entire little broadcast that we did here, and you'll see it right at the very beginning. Overall, Rhonda. Hey, Frankie, my mom asked how you are doing today. She misses you on BT last week. She around town one day, born and raised in Bradford. Boom, boom, boom. I'm doing great, by the way. I was off on Wednesday. What was that? Thursday, Friday, off on BT. I picked up my boys from camp. So Thursday was my day to go out and get some school supplies, to pick up clothes, to be a dad. Friday was pickup camp. Friday all afternoon was do laundry. Saturday was I got an invite from a friend that said, hey, it's the last day of really good weather this weekend. Come to the cottage. He has one boy. My other friend has 2 boys. These are all high school buddies from Bradford. We all went up and we all hung out. And then came back yesterday, did some shopping, and today here I am. And today I get ready more so for school and make sure the boys are in good shape. Adulthood, adulting, being a dad duties. Love it. Best job in the world, guys. I love this. Heather is replying to Nina. Skunks are usually beneficial to gardens. They eat small rodents and grubs and other insects. Farmers don't like skunks. They're helpful. I have one that comes around. Love him. If you don't want them around, use citrus peels. There's other ways to discourage the skunk. Usually skunks are around as a food source, and they do a lot of good. Most things in nature are actually there as a benefit. The reason why they're attracted is generally it's a food source. So we get rid of their food source. So if we eliminate grubs, we can get rid of skunks overall. If we kind of put some barriers up, if they're going underneath a deck and things like that, we wait them to have their babies and then we let them leave, and then we actually block those areas so they go somewhere else. There's a way for us to work with nature overall and to really benefit nature overall as well. So that's really good. Deborah says, hey is for horses. Bum, bum. Denise has a big thing that's going on here. Great news, Frankie, or Dennis. Sorry about that. My morning glories are starting to grow blooms. Boom. The reason why the morning glories grew blooms now is that they are heat sensitive. So when we have warm nights, warm days, those morning glories are like, I don't want to bloom because that takes energy. So I'm just going to rest. Now that the nights actually got cooler, we're down around 10, 13 degrees and the days are a little cooler. The morning glory is like, hey man, I like this. I'm going to bloom and show off. They're 10 by 20 now, and they're mixed with 2 cucumber plants in separate garden boxes, just massive. Best idea was using tomatoes to train them up, and then bamboo. So she got a good support system that was there overall as well. So Thank you for sharing. And it's amazing how many of our plants this year just really had some time. Okay, this is a really good recommendation as well. Susan Poff, it may be bindweed. It's awful. I had a client who had this everywhere, and I pulled it out every 3 weeks for 5 years. It's finally gone. Susan's my good friend that joined me on the river cruise. My good friend up in the cottage country, up in, I think she said Bracebridge or Gravenhurst. Susan, thank you very much. And thanks for adding to this every week as well. Final question out there today as well is Deborah, bringing in my tropical plants in the house for the winter. Any tips for care? So first thing we want to always do is try to spray them. So we're going to spray them with insecticidal soap before bringing in. When you bring them in, you're going to put them in a bright room, not directly in front of a window. Often what you'll see is they will drop some leaves because they're going to adjust to light levels. As soon as they drop leaves, do not say, oh my God, they need more water. You want to allow them to dry out in between water. They'll drop some of their leaves. They'll adjust overall. You may have to do an additional spraying indoors. Now that our daylight hours are getting shorter, we're starting to reduce the amount of watering of our indoor plants because the daylights are not as long and we're getting more overcast days. So just make sure everything is always dry before we water indoors. The number one killer of a plant indoors is too much kindness. Hey, for all those who join me today, thank you very much. We are just over 31 minutes. I try to join you guys each and every week for a half an hour. I will be back next Sunday. And, you know, I may adjust the time that I'm doing this because I've had some people on Sunday mornings saying that they're off to church. So I got to be really aware of that. So I'm considering maybe doing this on an evening during the week. I would love it if you chimed in, if you'd like to see it on an evening during the week. I'm thinking around 7 o'clock, kind of after dinner. I'm kind of flirting with the time what would work best for everybody out there. And I'm also finding that now Sunday morning sometimes can get a little bit busy. But if it's Sunday morning that sticks, then we'll do Sunday morning at 9. Or maybe we'll even do it at 8. Was 8 great today? Let me know. I'm always here to help. We're going to be launching the website. I've been working on this thing. It's pretty, but it's near. It's near and it's close. To all those who join me today, thank you very much. Keep blooming. Have a great garden day overall. Happy September, everybody. Happy Labor Day. Happy back to school.